we invoke Islamic consciousness. The same thing for Muslims in India too. So now, I've often been explaining to you the whole process. I've often been doing that, but I would like to give you, every time I would give you some kind of clarity to understand what the process is. It's basically the downloading of a higher consciousness. What is that? It is Paranjyoti coming in as that higher consciousness. It can come in as any kind of consciousness that we want. So, in order to make it very powerful, we are now going for Kalki consciousness and all together Kalki consciousness. And the Christians, when they do outside India, they invoke Christ consciousness, all together Christ consciousness, and it's very, very powerful. So, for you people, Kalki is already deep inside you. Since Hindus have been speaking about Kalki for so many centuries now. It's deep inside your unconscious. So you'll invoke Kalki consciousness, because what is expected is Kalki consciousness. And for the Christians, it is the second coming of Christ. Therefore, they have to invoke Christ consciousness. And for Buddhists, they're waiting for Maitreya. So it is Maitreya consciousness. The Muslims are also waiting. For them, it is Islamic consciousness. Now, you must understand this process, that it is a clear download. Now, as I've often told you, what I am teaching is the teaching given by the ancients. And the process that I'm using is the process given by the ancients. Who are these ancients? Not our ancestors, be very clear. They were there probably before the humans arrived on the planet. The humans might have come probably 300,000 years ago, 400,000 years ago, we do not know. The date is getting older and older now. But these ancients lived probably for millions of years, much before humans arrived on the planet. Humans, of course, they lived as food gatherers, then hunters, then they moved into agriculture, and slowly they developed. They went through the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron, all that you read in history. That happened to humans. But you don't read anything about the ancients. These were a totally different species, bigger in size, very, very strong, and extraordinarily intelligent, and much, much older than the human species. And they mostly were there until the pre-Vedic times. If you could take the Vedic times as probably 14,000 or 16,000 years, the date is getting pushed back. They lived before that. And they taught some techniques and methods, but they did not give the real science. Probably it was too much for our ancestors to learn, or probably they learned and they forgot, we do not know. But some teachings they did give, and they also taught us some techniques. Not just us. They were a global civilization. They were a very advanced global civilization. They taught to people all over the world. They taught to the Chinese people, they taught the North Americans, the South Americans, the Central Americans, the Europeans, Africans, whatnot. The whole world they taught. But most of it is now forgotten. But in bits and pieces, it is preserved and it is preserved there. For example, some things are preserved among the South Americans, some among the North American Indians, some among the Ainu of Japan, some among the Australian Aborigines, and some by us. The most part of what is there is preserved by us, and little is preserved by the others. But the whole thing is not there anywhere. Even if you add up the whole thing, it does not equal to what they really taught. We have a small portion, but more than the others, which of course comes down to us through the Vedas, through the Upanishads, and down the line. Now, it is very strange that these were a global civilization and they taught around the globe. So why did they disappear? Why did they vanish? There are a number of theories. We do not know what is true and what is not true. Maybe later we could find out. But how do I know it was all over the world? For example, I have spoken to the chiefs South American native peoples like the Incas. The Inca chiefs have come, they've stayed here for some time, and they have discussed with me. And while speaking, I was referring to ancestors, the ancients, not ancestors, ancients, and they too were referring to the ancients. They did not say ancestors. And then when we went into the philosophy, we found things very, very stunningly similar. The philosophy of the ancients is extremely sophisticated, and here were these native peoples and their chiefs were there, and they were speaking equally sophisticated philosophy, almost identical philosophy. And then we went into our rituals, and they had almost identical rituals. Then when I moved on to the North American native chiefs who also came and stayed here, of course, there are things which they knew and we did not know. There were things which we knew and they did not know. But so much was something which they also knew and we also knew. And they also said the ancients. Nowhere they said our ancestors. They said the ancients. And the same thing repeated with the Australian Aborigines. The chief came here. By Aborigines, you should not think they are not educated. They are very educated and they are very sophisticated, but they happen to be native Aboriginal chiefs. Some of them look very much like us only. And they spoke an extremely sophisticated philosophy. So I was quite astonished that Aboriginal people, they are speaking such sophisticated philosophy which even modern science does not speak of. Then I also met the Ainu people of Japan, whose philosophy is somewhat very similar and culture very similar to the Tamil people. So it has been there throughout the world. So now what I am teaching you is what the ancients taught, who were there much, much before the Vedas. The Vedas themselves are probably 18,000 years or even 20,000 years old. This is much, much before that. And they're probably millions of years older, and more evidence is coming in now. What we call solid evidence is coming in. But we have other forms of evidence, which I would talk later. So the technique is, the process is basically shutting down the activities of the brain. And then you go for the download. That is the technique which they used. So you can shut down the activities of the brain and you could download mathematics. You could download astrophysics. You could download anatomy. Everything you could download. So there are certain specific things you must do with the universe. It's all very clearly given. Nothing is vague there. Systematically what should be done. And then you could go for a download. But the key thing is slowing down the brain, making it less and less active. Only then it's possible. Then you can tune into all these things in the universe. So, and that comes as a download. It's also called manifestation. So if you want Lord Muruga to manifest in you, then we must slow down the brain and then invoke Lord Muruga. There's a process for that. And then Muruga consciousness would be downloaded in you, or it could be Shiva's consciousness, anything. But the first criteria is to slow down the activity of the brain. That is why we tell you, please relax as much as you can. If you relax, the brain slows down. And when it slows down, the download becomes very easy. And the other thing for slowing down, what is required is trust. When you do trust, then you could easily slow down the brain. The slowing down the brain is the crucial factor. Once it is slowed down, then the next is the download. And how that is done, I have told you, it is done by the light beings who adjust your pancha pranas, and they can adjust your pancha pranas only if you slow down a bit. Then more slowing down, they would be able to handle. So adjusting the pancha pranas, they would slow down your brain, and then they would, of course, carry out mystical surgeries. They are required. I won't go into great detail about the surgeries, because that is not required for you. Right now, you're only patients, so you better undergo the surgery. Later, we could talk about what surgery was done to you. So the surgery. And then they, of course, after the surgery, they change the programs. as you have been told, the 10 programs which manage you, which control you, which rule over your lives.